great. Oh, technology.
If this happens, oh wait, getting an error
Oh,
but not
okay,
getting
cool.
an error. This is so crazy.
All right, if you guys could
Oh,
hear that.
technology. If
Now
this
let's see if I
happens, oh
can.
wait, getting an error but not
Okay.
getting.
All right. I was able to mute it. All right, we're doing good now. All right, so let me start over again. So today, because I'm going to delete that other video. So today we're talking about combating perfectionism and about making progress on your goals in your business, and 5 tips on how you can actually work on your perfectionism. Perfectionism does not come, from not wanting to do things. It has like a really entrained it's an adaptive pattern that we develop as kids, and it stays with us pretty much until we really truly work on it. And those of us that have been working on ourselves and working on different aspects of ourselves, we're probably making a lot of progress in certain areas, but then we often find ourselves still being trapped into this whole perfectionism mindset. And so I see this with my clients. I see it with myself as well. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit about 5 tips that I have learned that work, really well for me and for my clients about how to overcome your perfectionism tendencies. So the very first thing that really needs to happen in order for your perfectionism not to creep in, and this is particularly when it comes to business and doing things with your business stuff, is to really have clearly defined goals, and not just like a bigger picture of what you want to happen, but really get it broken down. Like, what is your big picture? How does that look when you break that down into a year? How does that year look when you break it down into a quarter? How does that quarter look when you break it down into your month? And then how does that month look when you break it down into your week? When you get really clear on where you're going and how you're going to build it and how you're going to get there, all of the steps to get there become actually quite obvious. If you, I mean, if you know what you're doing and you have a plan, right? Like then they're very obvious. Obviously, if you're really new to business and you haven't done this stuff before, then you might need to go get help to do that. I know someone who does that. But really, when you do have your goal, like when you know what you're working towards, everything you do becomes relevant. And it's really easy to get stuck in perfectionism when you're not really clear about why you're even doing something. Like, you kind of know why you're doing it, but if you really haven't thought about, like, okay, I need to do this first and this first and this first in order to get this, and kind of keeping focused on that, it makes it easier to just get things done. Because especially like if it's recording videos or getting a document together, or creating new content, all of that stuff, it's so easy to go down rabbit holes or just try to make it perfect, perfect, perfect. But at the end of the day, nothing is perfect. I mean, even look at like the best masterpiece books out there. I guarantee you they could still be worked on to make them quote unquote more perfect, right? But they're still great. Like, it's okay. But part of it, like when it comes, we'll just use the writer for example. Like, if you have a goal that you want to get a book published, by October of 2021, for example, like, you need to have a certain amount written. You know that there is going to be a certain amount of time that's required for the editing process and for the launch process and all that. And once you break down all of those goals and like what your end goal is and all the steps you need to do in order to get to that, it makes it easier to write, because you're like, you know, also, like if you have ADH, which I do, and actually I think most of my clients do as well. Sometimes we need those deadlines to kind of light that fire under our booties, right, to get going. And so when you have your goals defined and you know what they are and you know what you're working on and why you're doing what you're doing, it makes it so much easier to just get things done and get going. So that's like the first step. Really have your goals defined, know what it is you're working on and why you're working on it. It makes it just a lot easier to get over like the imperfections of the work that you're doing. And then next is determining what is good enough. So, this kind of comes down to, like, let's use the writing the book example, right? When you're writing a book that you have to have a certain amount of pages. Now, does it have to be this huge, crazy, long thing? Maybe, maybe not. But maybe your publisher is like, look, it just needs to be between 30,000 and 50,000 words. I don't know. I don't actually know what book words are. And I think that's actually like a short story, if I remember correctly. But for example, let's say you had to have between 30,000 and 50,000 words, right? Then you know that once you get to around 40,000, if you start stumbling and you haven't, don't know what else to do or how to make it better, you kind of know already that, like, that's good enough. Like, you now know that you've got your book that you can turn into your editor and start working on the next phase of your business based on the goals that you've already set up. And this also comes into play, like if we're recording videos or making a lead magnet or creating social media posts or whatever it is. Like, sometimes we want things to be perfect, but at the end of the day, no one is paying attention to our stuff as much as we're paying attention to it. And in fact, even as a coach who really does look at all of my clients' stuff, like, unless I have one of my clients that's like, can you specifically review this? A lot of times I don't notice the stuff either. And, that's just because at the end of the day, like, it's the main points that we get to. So, especially when it comes to social media, I look at all my clients' social media and I usually read and try to interact with it. But, sometimes I'm sure there's like mistakes in there that I just don't notice because it doesn't, like, it's not mine and I don't care, right? So just know, because think about like what is good enough. Like, if there is someone that you want to be like, look at what they do. Like, is everything they do absolutely perfect? Probably not. Like, there's probably mistakes out there. It's just that you're so much more forgiving of other people's mistakes than you are of your own. So just kind of establishing like what is going to be good enough. Like, all right, I know, like, I'm writing this book and I know that 30,000 words is going to be good enough, even though I might ideally want to have 50,000 words. All right, you did that. Knowing that getting, 5 graphics done for your social media content plan for next week is good enough, although you maybe want to get 9 of them done, or writing 3 out of your 5 captions, right? Like, just get going and just, determine like, okay, what is like my minimum, what is, my ideal, and then accepting that like sometimes good enough really is good enough, right? And just letting that, kind of sink in and think about it, because also, part of our perfectionism, as I said, comes from not necessarily having clear goals and not really knowing, what everything is tied in. And when you really kind of think about like what your plan is and what you're working towards, you realize, oh, wait, this really is good enough. I don't need it to be, 10 pages long. It really just needs to be 3 pages, because this is what really the minimum kind of requirements are. And at the end of the day, I'm still helping my people. So that would be my tip number 2. And then kind of tied in with all of this too is determining the path of least resistance. So if when it comes to writing your social media, doing your social media posts, I'll take Instagram for example. If you're really good with your graphics, but you're not really good with your captions, then, work on the graphics first, because that's going to get you going on it too. And then figure out, okay, what is a good way for me to write your captions? Like, try to figure out what creates your path of least resistance. Is it because you want to spend more time on it? And then if that's the case, then schedule in some time. That will allow you to do it. Start doing batch processing. Use a Pomodoro technique. There's so many different things that you can do to create a path of least resistance, especially for those activities that we maybe put off because maybe we have some insecurities that are hidden there about, and that's why our perfectionism comes out to play, because we just want it to be really, 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 really good for everyone else, even though really it's about us, right? So really think about, what systems can you put in place so that way you do create your path of least resistance, and pay attention to where you see your stumbling blocks. Like if you notice that you're procrastinating on something, that is procrastination is like this wonderful gift that our our bodies or people or minds, whatever, that they give us. Is it's saying, hey, there is something that I'm uncomfortable with or stressed out about or anxious about, and therefore instead of tackling it and doing it, I am avoiding it, right? So really, take a look at, what is creating this resistance in there. And maybe it's about, maybe what you need to do is just say a few mantras before you do a task, right? Like you've created your batch processing time, and now you're going to be working on your captions, and you say, you know what, I won't overthink, but I will instead act and learn, right? Like maybe you just have to say that before you start going, and really, maybe you need to take a moment and meditate before you start writing, or take a walk around the block, or stop and have some tea. Like there are so many things that you can do that will help create a better path of wanting to take action, and, you know, kind of dissolving away that resistance, right? Because that is, that's that at the end of the day, like the actions you take, even if you fail, they're going to get you closer to your goal. But the actions you don't take are just going to keep you right where you are. So just try to like shed light on what's going on in your life, and like what is kind of blocking the path, and then figure out how to like get that stuff out of there, right? And then number 4 is determining what is your why. Now, this goes a little bit tied back into your goals, right? So a lot of times we create these goals, and we have these business goals. Like maybe we're working on growing our audience, and we get really focused on the numbers and the likes and the interactions, but we forget why. We forget why we're even doing what we're doing. So, one of my favorite ways to do this is by journaling. I, at least a few times a week, I do a practice where I'm so happy. I call it I'm so happy and thankful now that. And I take a few moments and I write down I am so happy and thankful now that. And I just imagine my life the way I want it to be. And it helps kind of anchor me back into what it is that I'm doing. Because, I talk about not just about maybe the material things that I'm doing, but also about, the impact I'm making, and I say I am making, right? Because I'm talking about how it's going to be in the future. The impact I'm making, the changes I'm making in people's lives, the comments that I get, the feeling that you get when someone tells you that you've changed their life, that you've made their life better because of the work that you've done. Really kind of tapping back into that, once again is going to help you overcome that procrastination, because when you are focused on helping other people in particular, and I know most of my people here really are about helping other people make transformations, really make big changes in their lives, however that looks, right? We all have our different ways of doing it. But when we really focus in on that, it helps us get out of our own way, right? Because when you are focused on helping someone else, like you're not worried about like, do I look great on this in this video? Am I stumbling on my words? You just know that you need to get the content and the information to your client, so that way they can start making the changes and the progress that they need. And even if it's for people that you don't know yet, when you're really focused in on that why, you want them to get that information. You want them to get what you're talking about, because you know that the sooner that they can get enrolled into your program or purchase, your offer, they're going to start making big changes in their life. And that can be the fuel that you need to be able to not focus so much on that inner critic voice that we listen to all the time. It's really, they say like mindfulness, right? Like it's all about paying attention to the thoughts that we have, and then, thinking, is this thought serving me? Is this thought even my thought? Is this thought something I want to think? Or, what is a better thought that I want to think? And that is being aligned with your why, right? Like, why are you even in business? Why are you doing what you're doing? And if worrying about creating a perfect video or creating a perfect post is keeping you from, going out there and doing the things that you need to do, then maybe you need to get refocused back onto your why, so that way your why becomes stronger than that inner critic voice. And that's really, really the big key. And I think if you look at anyone who's really successful, it's it's easier, once you start making those changes and in that mindset shift, and then you start seeing the results from making those changes, those personal changes. Like once you start getting out of your own way, people start coming to you, right? And then the business starts flowing in, and then you start making more money. And the more money you make, the more impact you make, and the more you're able to change people's lives, and the more you're able to, live the life that you've always wanted. And obviously, it's a lot easier to do once you're making, 10,000 a month or more, right? But getting to that point, I know sometimes is a struggle, and that's really where the perfectionism really comes into play. And it's really just our insecurities that are coming out, right? Because we're not necessarily confident in what it is that we're doing. But if you can get confident in why it is that you're doing, the what will just come, right? What's going to come with practice, the what's going to come the more you do things, the more you get out there and you put something out there, get the feedback, get the criticism, embrace the criticism, because that means you get to change and improve and make things better to reach even more people, right? So that always comes back to our why. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And really hold on to that, especially if you find yourself procrastinating getting something out, because really procrastination and perfectionism, they're like brother and sister, right? Like, why do you procrastinate? It's usually because you're overwhelmed, and mostly because you're overwhelmed because you can't do a good job, and there's some inner story that's going on there that is preventing you from doing the work in the first place, right? So procrastination and perfectionism, you can pretty much change those two words around, use those words interchangeably, right? So focus on your why, and that will give you that extra fuel you need to get over your perfectionism and to keep going. And then last but not least, determine the worst possible outcome. This is a practice I do actually with my son, my older son, and it works really well. I do it with myself as well. And it is thinking about what happens when you put out like the worst possible thing, right? Like, let's say I'm putting out a lead magnet and it's just awful. No one likes it. No one signs up for it. All of that stuff, right? What's the worst that happens? No one signs up for it. I wasted time, but I didn't really waste that much time because, I'm just putting it out. And then, but what's the cost, the worst possible outcome if I just keep working on it and never put it out? The worst possible income is that I don't move forward in my business and I'm still stuck right here. And I'm waking up a year later wondering, why my life is still the way it is. And that is because, I let my own insecurities of right now interfere with my outcome. And so when you kind of take a moment to stop and think, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if I put out this unedited video, right? Maybe I get a comment or two. Okay. Like, all right, I already know it's not an edited video. I know that there's room for improvement. So like, what is anyone going to say to me that's really going to change or going to be worse than my own inner critic voice, right? Now, the trick is to not listen to those people if you do get those people. But honestly, if you do start getting critics on stuff, that's actually a good sign. That means that people are paying attention. They're watching what you're doing. I absolutely wholeheartedly embrace any comments and feedback, including the negative, because then that means that I impacted them enough for them to even want to create post a comment, right? So that is, so the worst possible outcome really isn't a worst possible outcome in that particular case. But when you really think about like what is the worst possible outcome, it's usually the inaction, right? The inaction is never going to move you closer to your dreams. It's never going to help you get those goals that you've set out. It's never going to help you, live your why and fulfill the why and your purpose and your you're wanting to help the world and heal the world and create the transformations. It is, really the worst possible outcome is usually not to do anything at all and to stay stuck in your fear and your anxiousness. And because that your perfectionism, when you don't take action, right, you're still anxious, right? Like you're still just worried about the thing that you're still haven't done yet, and it's still on your mind, and you're still, you're going to be like, oh, I should have done it, I should have started sooner. I mean, I hear that is probably the biggest thing, like hands down, with the people that I've worked with. It was like, oh my gosh, I wish I had started doing this sooner. I wish I had really started getting focused sooner. I wish I had started taking some of these actions sooner, especially once there's like this jump that people make it. There's like a shift in people. They really decide like, okay, I'm in it. I'm doing this. I'm making this business a success. And once they do that, that's the worst thing is like the not taking the action. So thinking about what's your worst possible income, being in the same spot, wasting a lot of time, wasting a lot of money, doing, not as much as you could have, right, to move you closer, move the needle toward on your dreams, right? So that is that's kind of it. So I know this is a little bit shorter. That was because of the tech difficulties. So since it's already 1 o'clock, I wanted to end this here. So hopefully these tips, help you out and really, if you do find yourself procrastinating or just wanting to edit something and not work, not sending out emails, not, letting people know, not posting on social media, whatever it is, whatever you're working on, and you find yourself really kind of getting stuck in that whole perfectionism, uh, you know, train of thought, use these tips and take a few moments to think about your why, think about your goals, think about like what the worst possible outcome is. What is the what was point two? Oh yeah, like determine like what is good enough, like what's going to be okay, what can I get away with, and then what are some actions I can take that will clear the resistance out of the way, so that way you can take that action and you make progress instead of being stuck in perfectionism. All right. I think, as I said, that's it for today. I hope these helped you, and I will see you all next week. Bye.